Today we are talking POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, and exercise. Today we get to talk to the author of a new systematic review out on this topic, and I just can't wait. So I'm gonna get Lauren in here, and if we haven't met before, my name is Julie Hirschberg, and can you tell how excited I am? Lauren, I'm gonna try not to talk like a million miles a minute because I'm so excited. But I'm Julie Hirschberg. I'm a neuro PT, and I have the great privilege to have some amazing colleagues all over the country like Lauren. Okay, Lauren, getting you has a few that I think, Lauren, we're going to need to come on here a few times to talk about them, because you are,
I
yay,
did it.
hi,
I did
you
it.
did it. Lauren, is this your first Instagram live?
It is. And I'm trying to make it work on I feel very old right now. I'm trying to make it work on my earbuds, but I don't think I'll be able to. So it might just be regular.
Okay. I mean, you sound great.
Okay,
You
good.
sound great. Um, Lauren, I'm so excited. And like, I'm kind of like amped up for this, and it's not even caffeine. So I'm so sorry if like I'm talking way too fast. Because
You're good. You're good.
we've
Thanks
been
for having
like,
me.
when this article came out, I was like, we need to talk about this. And that was like a while ago. And so the anticipation for me has been building. And then you dropped a bomb on me on this other great article that just came out like today. Did that come out today?
This morning, yeah,
This
yeah.
morning. Oh my gosh. So we're going to have to schedule another one because this is like, I think you and I have like it's like we're sisters from another mother. Like we have very similar interests and paths and passions because I took one look at that article because you just sent it to me and I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to talk about this. So
Thanks.
anyway, stay tuned, everyone. Stay tuned. But today we're going to talk about an article that you do with a big group of folks, the impact of exercise to treat POTS, or postural orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, a systematic review. And for folks, by the way, who don't know you, Lauren, can I brag on you for a moment? Uh, Lauren is a neuro PT. She's also an athletic trainer. She's got this great history in sports and then into neuro. I met Lauren, I think, for the first time at like one of our professional conferences, going to one of her talks on dysautonomia, and like, not gonna lie, kind of fell in love. I was like, oh, like she's speaking my language, and then Lauren's in Utah, works at Intermountain Health, right? But also does like a lot of advocacy and education and other work through a really cool company because it's called Phoenix. And I'm just like a really big fan of the Phoenix, and rising up from the ashes. So, um, and also is getting your doctorate, like getting your PhD, right? Like just a few things happening for you. But you are doing that. Like, if I were getting my PhD and doing my research, like you're doing what I would love to do. I'm not going back to school, so I'll leave you to it. But just taking our clinical questions that we're seeing as physical therapists, we're seeing how hard it is to implement like a quote protocol, right? And then you and I also have like a lived experience, right? So Lauren has a lived experience of experiencing a severe concussion and dysautonomia as well. So there's that like personal passion side, but you're just like the boss, Lauren. You are the boss.
Love it. It's so funny you say that because I went to your talk and like totally fanned out, and I wanted to ask you a question about a patient, and I was like sweating and like tried to. So it's so funny to hear it because it was the same meeting, and we went to your big room because you were in a very big room, and and I was like, I'm gonna ask her. I'm gonna get the guts to ask her this question.
So we're like mutual fans. Mutual fans on mutual paths, and like Lauren and I are we are going to have to put together a CSM doc to like cross these paths, right? Like,
Yeah,
oh,
that would be amazing.
um, I know. I'm so excited. But let's well, first, like if you could share maybe a little bit. I know this article was published in April of this past year. Um, but how long have you been on this kind of train of looking at dysautonomia, POTS, and exercise? Like, where did this article kind of come from?
Yeah, so I mean, full transparency, it was all an accident. So I was treating patients with chronic concussions because I had a brain injury that didn't resolve the way that they told me it would. And in that process, we had this subset of patients who were responding beautifully to portions, but then we just couldn't get them across the finish line, and we didn't know what was wrong. And just prior to COVID, we started learning what dysautonomia even was. So even being in that space and treating the most complicated patients, I was just ignorant to the condition.
Mm.
And as we started treating those patients, I learned that my mystery illness that had really altered the course of my life for a decade was actually POTS. And in that process, started collaborating with my friends at the University of Utah, excuse me, and we wanted to create something new that was more accessible. And I came from the concussion space, so I really brought that mindset of set beats per minute, symptom guided. It's been proven to be safe right after brain injury, so why can't it be safe for everybody? And so I really came into this dysautonomia space as an outsider, but an insider because I was a patient.
Yeah.
And I just really can't. There's so much respect for everything that came before us, but having something that just wasn't accessible to people at such a high rate just didn't sit well with me. And I think that's just the chip on my own shoulder of being a patient. And so it was really just an accident. I'm a very happy accident, but an accident nonetheless.
I'm happy for that accident because literally the Utah Adapt protocol, which you shared in the meeting at CSM, and then like week ago downloaded, it's still like one of my most shared things. There's like a website and it has all these great resources for clinicians and patients. Um, it's my favorite. And I've been in this space for a while when we were like doing the Levine and then we were doing the chop and like and it wasn't working. Like it just people couldn't do it. Not that people couldn't do it. I shouldn't say that. It just wasn't right for people. So I we needed something else. So I will say, by the way, if people are like, what the heck are you talking about? The Adapt protocol, I'll put the link to that website along with your articles and this video in our newsletter this week. So if we're talking about something and you're like, what the heck is that? I'll share links so you get like the full picture. But that work I think has like really changed the game for a lot of us as physical therapists and for our patients.
Yeah, I mean, and again, like total respect for everything that came first. And there wasn't any PT in this space, really, right? I mean, there was you, a unicorn, but otherwise, I mean, it was a 17-page packet that you were told to kind of self-direct. And that was so important when barely any physicians even knew what it was. But now
True.
there's such a cool place for supervised, structured, tailored exercise. And it's wild that starting at 3 minutes because that's all a person could do was controversial. 5 years ago, that was a controversial idea. And now we're like kind of moving through that a little bit faster, which is really nice. But my big thing is just making things accessible to wherever you are so that you can see that there is a place that you can go to. If the barrier to entry is so high that you can't access the number one treatment, it's great that it works for some, but so my whole goal was like, can we just lower that access point and then get them to this higher level activity as soon as possible?
Yeah. And I think for me, that was the thing. And I think any other person who has experienced exercise intolerance, like most of the people I were meeting couldn't start. Right. And so having this like beginning spots of the bare minimum and a place to start, which is like what we were making up and doing because like you just people couldn't do it. But that just was so neat. And I think it has really I think it's shifted perspectives for physical therapists to be like, oh, really? They're like there somebody's capacity could be here and I can do something about it. I like And also for our patients, I think it's just so hopeful that you could start super, super low and slow and still get somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it opens up your life, right? I mean, my triggering event, I've had 4 million head injuries, but my big triggering event was running a marathon and I blacked out. I hit the wall during my marathon. And so I ran a marathon in 4 hours and 11 minutes. You can't run a marathon without talking about it. That's a 100% statistic. And then I couldn't exercise at all. And I would almost pass out cooking dinner and I would come to standing over a burner on the stove, right? Like so dangerous. And so it's hard sometimes when you went from being an athlete to 5 minutes causes you to have symptoms and the emotional
Yes.
burden that comes with that. And it almost feels like it makes it okay to start at such a low amount because you know that you're going somewhere and you can kind of hold space for how hard that is emotionally and also
Yeah.
do the physical thing that you need to do to make exercise accessible again. But
Yeah.
it's my little
Yeah.
soapbox. So
No, I'm like, oh my gosh, that soapbox speaks to me as the marathon runner, but it speaks to so many of our clients, particularly, and you note in this paper, a lot of people have POTS, the numbers have gone up since COVID. And this is exactly what we see. And it's so defeating for the person that was physically active. I mean, it's defeating for anybody because you just rely on getting out of bed during the day, in general. But yeah, there's such a heavy mental load to
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's important too. I mean, we're going to talk about POTS because that's what the article is on. But for those people who are in this dysautonomia spectrum or treating space, reminding ourselves that POTS and dysautonomia are not synonymous, but POTS is a subtype of dysautonomia. And more patients will not qualify for a POTS diagnosis than will. It's actually a pretty small subset. And so making sure that even though the research is really strong in POTS, because it has such clear inclusion criteria, it makes it for a better study. We want to make sure that we extrapolate out these findings across this orthostatic and exercise intolerant spectrum so that we're super inclusive. So we'll use the word POTS a lot today because that's the article you asked us to talk about. But I just want to make sure everybody knows that these similar ideas are going to pan out in different ways, but they're going to pan out across this spectrum of patients. And so don't feel like, oh, they don't have that 30 beat per minute change, so I can't help them. Absolutely not. Like still follow very similar principles and get those people better too.
I think that's beautiful because it, just because they only went up 39, beats per minute as a teenager, does that like they didn't meet the criteria, but like they are presenting with all the same pieces. I think that is so very helpful. Uh, and like hopeful for all of us as clinicians, as well as our patients. But with that in mind, for folks, so you gave a great like dysautonomia umbrella. POTS is a piece of that. Maybe for folks that don't know POTS, like giving the quick and dirty definition of what that is, and then also like the recognition that there are things like this that
Yeah.
can respond. Yeah.
Yeah. So POTS is one subtype of dysautonomia, and that umbrella is probably going to change as we look into it more, right? Because there wasn't very much research until very recently. And basically, it's your heart rate is responding to a change in gravity. So for these patients, that decrease in oxygenation and blood flow to their brain when they move upright against gravity causes their heart rate to go up higher. And there's a lot of questions about why exactly that happens that the smartest people in the world don't know the answers to. So I'm not going to give them to you either, as I'm definitely not on that list. And so basically, they think that it is an autoimmune condition or that it lives with autoimmune conditions. 80% of us will have another injury or illness, a comorbidity. We tend to have more connective tissue issues. So there's some really interesting things that go along with what makes us so spicy and special. And when we are able to exercise, that conditioning builds more blood inside of our body. And that gives us more currency to use when we have to fight gravity, like everybody else, because that's what humans do is we fight our lives or gravity. You must have orthostatic intolerance, which means you must have trouble when you're upright and moving. That gets better when you lay down and you rest. So just because you have a really high heart rate doesn't necessarily mean that you have POTS, and there's other medical conditions that can cause things like this. And so you want to make sure that you fit the symptom profile before you start any specific treatment.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Everybody should listen to that, by the way. Like, record it, listen to it, save it, share it. Um, and so what I love a systematic review because I'm just like, you read all the literature, you tell me what it says. I'm also always like, oh my gosh, you had to screen like 1,400 articles to get seven, right? Like, this is a labor of love. Like, I don't know if everybody realizes, like, oh, come on here and review an article. And like, and there's a lot of people who went into this too, right? So, how long does this take to do this type of work?
I think we worked on this one for it published in 2025, so almost 4 years, 3.5 years. This came out of the so John Hopkins had a journal club, and that group morphed into this group, and they still have their journal club, and they're amazing. And Dr. Cortez and Dr. Dal Mullen did most of the screening, so I cannot take any credit for the thousands of articles that they screened. And then they come back with a certain number of articles that meet that criteria, and then you review those articles and you decide if they meet it further. So I was really ignorant to how much work a systematic review truly was, or how long it takes, but to do it the right way, it takes a long time. So I'm so happy this one is out in the world now.
Well, and we needed it, and obviously like some of the end result is kind of like, well, we need more studies because there's like not the evidence isn't super great. There's a lot of like biases and things like that, which you'll talk about. But you had to they set up some criteria to include in the studies. And one of the things that I loved was that it actually also caught all the comorbid things that we as clinicians like always see. I've never met a person that only had POTS. I never have in my entire life. So, um, how was this kind of like group of studies decided on, and like particularly looking at these comorbid conditions that might be there, and the outcomes? I think this was another thing that you all discussed was like the outcome, like why weren't everybody reporting on quality of life? Come on now, like this was missing, right? So how were those decided, like those criteria?
So it was really hard to find robust literature to review, period. And so the inclusion criteria ended up becoming POTS, right? They had to at least have diagnosed them with POTS and it was mostly head up till table testing, because remember that if it was published in 2018, it was done in 2015, right? And so you're really
Yeah.
stepping backwards in a time capsule. Most of the articles eliminated comorbidities. So only one article allowed and stratified or equally dispersed people who had EDS. So for the
Mm.
most part, an actual representation of this patient population was not included.
Mm.
And so, oh, I forgot to take off my Instagram timer. We'll see what happens.
I hope it doesn't shut you out, Lauren. I love that
I'm
you
trying
have
to
that
have my
though.
mental health care, so I have my
I love
timer
it.
on there.
I love it.
I set a time. Hopefully, it'll let me keep adding time.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry. So basically, the net of the. I'm sorry, Julie. I told you this was going to be hard. Okay.
I
So
love it. I love it. It's real
so
life.
the net of it was that 4 of the studies that were included looked at the same data set. Okay, so there's not a lot of good research for POTS out there. So in our study, it ended up being a meta-analysis primarily because there wasn't enough literature to review. So of
Hmm.
all of these potential articles, there were only a handful that even predominantly said POTS, that diagnosed it in a way that was provable, right? So we'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then most of them eliminated patients with comorbidities. And then most of them did not include any quality of life measures. And so we're really, what I like to think about, because I like to lead with like a lot of open-mindedness about where their head was at, right? Like nobody knew anything back then. And so they're looking really for etiology or underlying currents
Ah,
or what is the cause. And so when we look at those studies, they really stuck to very objective measures, like what was their stroke volume, meaning how much blood
yeah.
comes out, right? What was their heart rate change? And they were looking for these super clean, really robust pieces of literature, but then it doesn't really translate to what you're actually going to see. And then the
Right.
exercise that they did, you talk about the protocols that existed before being inaccessible. Therefore, of the articles, because they were the same data set, the patients were doing 4 to 5 hours of exercise a week by the end of the protocol. Right. So where is
Wow.
that going to translate to clinical practice? So there are incredible pieces of literature. It's really important. It's going to inform all of the literature that comes forward because of all the research questions that we have, but it wasn't robust information by any shape or form, right? And that's a little
Yeah.
scary, but it's great because it means there's so far. If you're early in your research career, there is nothing but research questions to ask. So that's pretty cool.
That's great. You got all the questions now. Fabulous. So like looking at this and looking at those studies and kind of bringing together, by the way, I like we'll put a link in the newsletter, but I love a systematic review for the tables where it literally goes through like changes in supine heart rate, changes in upright heart rate. Like these were like, as you said, the like super objective measures. Stroke volume was the other one, and then just a couple of studies had quality of life. What was the overlying effect of exercise on these things that you found?
Yeah, so for people who are able to exercise, exercise works, right? So that's the good news is like
Woohoo!
75% of the patients who exercised and with whatever it looked like in those protocols had
Okay.
objective changes on their head up tilt table testing. Now,
Mhm.
that leaves a lot of room for questions. What were their symptom burdens? What were they
Right.
able to go to work? Were they, what did they look like? We don't necessarily know for all of them, or they weren't captured in ways that you can compare one study to the other, right?
Yeah.
But what we know is that you at least won't qualify for a POTS diagnosis anymore. And that's really exciting because you could imagine that that means your quality of life is probably better. And then we can do more research to figure out what's a minimum dose, something like the ADAPT. What's a minimum dose that you have to
Yeah.
do? Are you really going to exercise? Like, do your orthopedic patients who have a job and a family exercise always for 5 hours a week? Probably not. It's probably why the CDC and the WHO ask you to exercise for 150 minutes a week, and it's like a big ask, right? So, like, if we
Right.
create a protocol that a neurotypical healthy person isn't doing to not have heart disease, we're probably not translating to clinical practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Really, really helpful. So, in looking, I think you said something really like monumental here is that I want people to understand is like exercise can work to where people wouldn't even qualify for the POTS criteria, right? Um, and we'd like to know if their life was better. Like that we don't know. But you'd like to imagine that led to some changes for them. Now, it's interesting. I didn't even realize this. I'm going to try this. People can submit questions and it pops up on the screen. I've never seen
Oh,
this before,
cool.
but this is a great question because in the research, the gold standard is the head up tilt table. As clinicians, that's not super practical. And so Dr. Tinian is asking about clinically what can we do that's pretty well correlated with that gold standard test.
Yeah. So the active stand test is currently the top recommendation. There is the Nassau lean, but there are some things that are going on where we're currently being recommended to use the active stand test more, and we need to do some trials where we compare the two and we see what the results look like in comparison to head up tilt table testing. There was just an article that came out this year that looked at validating active stand test versus head up tilt table testing. Their recommendation was that we might need to lower that heart rate threshold a little bit, maybe 25,
Mm,
27 beats per minute. And I think we all clinically could probably
we kind of
see
do
that
that.
for sure, because
Yeah.
there's plenty of people who look like they have POTS and then they're just below the cutoff. So an
Yeah.
active stand test would be the recommendation. There currently is not any recommendation to do repeat testing or to test at the beginning and the end. Like we're just not there yet with clinical guidelines. But if a patient comes in, it is important to know what is their current orthostatic tolerance, how long can they stand for, and what does that look like? Because it helps guide your treatment. And then it can help differentiate which of the top three buckets they would end up in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really helpful. And that, like, we do the active stand test like every day, like all day, every day. It feels like, and I'll remind people as physical therapists, we're not diagnosticians. We're not diagnosing POTS, but we're really good at screening things. And if we see things in a person's function, if they're describing things, just like we would screen blood pressure, just like we would do a neurologic screen, like I honestly, like, to me the active stand is like a regular part of a neuro screen, partially because I'm seeing patients like you who are post concussion or have other comorbid conditions, and this is really common alongside of it. So very great question. Thank you, Daniel, for sending that. And what about the quality of life and function? I mean, this is an area I guess we really need more research on, but what did they find in the small studies that they had?
Yeah, I mean, in the small studies that we have to go off of, quality of life improved, but we don't have a great sensitive or reliable measure for what quality of life means for this patient population, right? So when we
Hmm.
talk at conferences or when we talk to patients, it's like, what does better mean? If I have a patient
Hmm.
who can now make lunches for their kids, or if I have a teenager who can now go to school with accommodations, they might perceive that to be better, and there aren't a lot of metrics that will capture that. There's not a lot of good change measures. There's a promise and there's some other things
Hmm.
that are out there, but we don't really know how to even start to calculate what change actually means. And we want to be cautious about validating patient experience. If my patient tells me I'm happy at this point in my recovery and I don't want to continue, I want to live within the envelope that I have. It's not
Hmm.
my place to decide if that's their endpoint or not. It's their place. And so I'm
Yeah.
the metric that can show that change, right? If they're
Yeah.
off of disability and they're working now, but they still have a high symptom burden, their SF-36 might be still on the lower side, but they're not on disability and they're doing these other things, and that's huge. And so I don't know who solves that problem. It's probably an incredible qualitative researcher somewhere. It's
Yeah.
probably not going to be me, but we do need a really good measure, and we need people to use the same measure, because we
Yeah.
can't compare your study and my study if you're collecting apples and I'm collecting oranges, right?
This is the problem in the systematic review, right? And this is a problem for most diagnoses, like comparing and like heterogeneity. I'm so curious too, like thinking about some of these protocols. I'm like, how did people not get worse exercising patterns? For me, like I was like, holy cow! Like, there's a potential there for people to get worse, but
Right.
potentially also the I guess thinking about where we are now with the adapt protocol and how we might be progressing exercise, do you think these older studies really looked at a subset of people with POTS?
Yes. Okay, two
Okay.
things. One, if I get kicked out, I'm feeling stressed about it, I will just change my timer and I'll come right back.
Oh, then we'll just have part two. No
Okay.
problem.
Okay. Okay. Because I'm feeling a little stressed about what this thing is doing now. Okay. Part two is they must have been looking at a subset because they eliminated all comorbidities, right? So
Right.
I would have to, but I don't know. That would be speculation, but I would have to imagine that those patients would be fundamentally different than other
Yeah.
patients. The researchers also were not always transparent with dropout causes. So they were between
Oh,
10 and 59% dropout rates, and they were not always described in detail. And so that skews your results as well, because you have a great question. Like, did people get worse? We don't know. Maybe like their grandma died and they moved, and that's why they didn't continue in the study. But maybe they got worse and they didn't want to come back, and that's why they didn't come back. And there's no way to know that if you don't report it in your findings.
so this is part of the analysis that you all did too, is just looking at these risks for bias, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is like, again, you kind of see the headline, exercise makes POTS better. And then it's like, Well, in some studies, 59% dropped out, right? Like, so it doesn't, I always like to look at who are the people, like, who were they
Mhm.
looking at? They were all Division 1 rowers who were 18 years old. It's like, that's not me. So, really understanding the population to be able to apply this is so helpful. What are some take homes for clinicians here? I mean, I feel like you've already talked about so many nuggets already. Like this is a master class right now. But what else should we be taking home?
Exercise and an intense volume works, right? If we know that, the research shows if they exercise for a couple hours a week, they get better. And so, how can I then go from my end goal, like I would with any other therapy goal? I want you to be able to climb 3 flights of stairs. Well, if I'm not going to kick you out of therapy because on day one you can't climb 3 flights of stairs, right? I'm going to have you practice step ups, or I'm going to have you do leg raises, or whatever it is. So sometimes if we relate these things to ortho, it makes it a little bit easier. How can I break down? How can I reverse engineer to a place that you can do? And then how do I motivate you to keep going and to stay consistent and to work through your regressions, not push through your regressions, but not make self-harming behaviors, like not doing nothing at all for 3 months because you got the flu or something like that? And how do I build you up to this therapeutic volume of exercise of that 150 minutes a week or more? And not having an incomplete, not having an all or none mindset when that patient's sitting across from us. I've got to get you here because that is going to get you better. What does that roadmap look like based on your life circumstances and your symptom burden?
Brilliant. You had me at motivate. So like I think that a lot of the protocols are very unmotivating and very unfun. And like this is why we like tell jokes during our dysautonomia exercise class because it's like some of the like doing supine exercises for a particular volume it could be very unfun. So making it motivating and fun, I think this is like that is brilliant. So very brilliant. Now from a patient standpoint, what yeah, I was gonna say Kara. Hi Kara. Kara says so boring, the chop protocol, right? Like Kara's a musician and a
You guys are
writer,
going to
right?
get
Like,
me in a lot of trouble. I got to.
no, we're not. No, we are not saying. I think this is where clinicians need to take we need protocols. We
Yeah,
need things that can be followed. We need things that can be studied. Then as clinicians, we make those practical. We
yeah.
say, Kara's a musician. Kara is a writer. And honestly, Kara, I think of you as like a community organizer. How can I make this thing that could be so boring, like into something really motivating and fun that, as you said, that like you can do consistently because that's the thing. Like it is, it's not going to stay consistent. You need the consistency. And Lauren, I think paused here and it might have, oh wait, are you back?
I did it.
Yeah. Okay, that was amazing. Your face was just paused for like 20 seconds and then it like
Okay.
reanimated like magic. Um
And I could hear you, so I got you.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. That's great. Our point is not to bash any
No.
protocols because actually this research was showing they're very, very effective.
Mhm.
And this is the same. I did a 5 year research study post stroke, right? Like I did that protocol to the book, right? After that, I took what I learned and I made it into something super engaging and fun for my patients. And this is why we're therapists.
Yeah.
And we're thankful that somebody has done the work to put together the protocol. And now let's like personalize it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so for our patients, then what, like when they're looking at this systematic review and trying to take something home, maybe they want to bring something to their clinician. What are some take homes?
Ooh, that's a good question. From the patient side of things, I would really hold your therapist accountable. Like, we don't want, sometimes in any job, people can kind of go on autopilot or just do what they're really good at or what they're used to doing, what they expect to do, right? Accountants do that. Everybody does that. And so coming to them and saying, I read this article that if I can get to this point, I'm going to get better. Now, what can we do together as a team to
Mm.
make sure I get to that place? How can you modify where we need to go so that it's accessible for me? Because we can't expect the patient to understand all of the pathophysiology of exercise, right? They don't, and the human component of it is that it is so hard to lay on your back and put your feet on the wall for 3 minutes and have that be hard. And so you need someone to say to you, it's going to get better. And this is how many symptoms are okay. And this is how many symptoms are not okay. And so going to your therapist and saying, like, I know that if I can get to here, I'm going to get better. Your job is to help me get from A to B. And I want you to do that for me. And I feel super motivated. And the patient being motivated and the patient doing the work is also really important, right? Because if you just come and see me, maybe you can see your therapist once a week. I see my patients every 6 to 8 weeks. And so if you can come in once a week and do your exercises, you're not going to get anywhere. You've got to do it at home. You have to do it every single day, and doing it back-to-back days. And this is a big part of the adapt too, is if I can get you to do it 5 days a week, I'm not triggering PEM. Right? I'm not triggering post-exertional malaise because you can do it on back-to-back days continuously. And that makes
Yeah.
it safe, right? I don't care
Yeah.
what your dose is. I don't care how much you're doing. I don't care how low it is and how inefficient it feels. If you're not triggering post-exertional malaise and you're moving in a forward direction, that is a win, and you will get to where you need to go if you just keep doing that, right? So that's a big, big take home for the patients would be, find your envelope, find the thing that doesn't make you worse, and start there and feel your feelings about how hard it is and how unfair it is and how it feels so unfunctional. And then put that in one box, do what you need to do, and unpack your feeling box when you're done with your cardio for the day. Okay?
I just like literally created a box for myself. My box would be a brain, but yeah, I'm gonna give all the crap I feel about some of the stupid things I have to do after I got a stress fracture with running, and I'm just gonna do those stinking exercises. Um, but
Mine is a check
there's
bag. I've got my
is
feelings in
it?
a check bag. It's a pretty, it's underneath the 50-pound limit, but it's a pretty big one.
I love that. Just check it. Just check that bag of feelings. Um, but I think the beauty is the hope. Like I found myself getting teary-eyed. I wish you were my therapist, Lauren. Um, but like this idea that like if it's even a minute, right? 2 minutes, three minutes, right? Like whatever it is, and not like consistently being able to do that. It's that you can go up from there despite flares happening, right? So I know that's not in this study, but as a human that lives in a condition that might flare with any kind of stress or any kind of virus or anything, it can often feel like with POTS, you're like, oh crap, here I am again, right? And so,
Yeah.
what is we know exercise works. How do you keep getting back on the horse?
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming off a pretty bad regression right now myself and feeling my feelings about that. And so, getting on that, I hate the stationary bike. It's probably because I only do it when I'm in a flare. So it's probably a very
Oh,
conditioned response at this point, right?
yeah.
But like getting back on that stationary bike and starting at 10 or 15 minutes and then building up from there and then finally getting to walk again. And it's hard, but also in my family, I was sick for so long, and I was married throughout the whole thing. So my spouse remembers what it used to be like. And so it really is my medicine. It really has to happen. If we're on vacation, I have to exercise for at least 20 minutes, at least every other day. I have the privilege to maybe pick a hotel where there is a gym, right? Or whatever that looks like in that moment, because not doing my exercise will make me worse. And so when patients are in a flare, I talk to them a lot about mitigating the flare. I understand that it's hard and it's not fair and we don't want to go backwards. and what can you do to stop the slide? What is your minimum dose in this moment? The goal is not progress. When I'm in a flare, the goal is pay back my debt, pay off my credit cards, get back to a neutral bank account, and then I can start to actually talk about progress again or about savings accounts, right?
Mhm.
So what do I do in a flare is anything I can possibly do. If it's 3 minutes, it's 3 minutes. If it's 20 minutes on the bike instead of 20 minutes of walking, then it's 20 minutes on the bike. But stop the slide. That's the
Mhm.
big thing that you want to really try to do.
Yeah, yeah. And like good old, like my mom would just kind of be like, just sleep it away. And it's like, that's actually not super helpful to
Yeah,
be supine all of the time.
yeah, yeah.
So, and as Shane is saying too, trying to get your confidence back after a fall is one of the hardest things I find.
Yeah. I mean, this
Yeah.
is where like motivational interviewing techniques. So if you're a therapist treating these patients, doing some motivational interviewing, the ANPT actually just did a 2-part series on motivational interviewing. That is a skill. Motivational interviewing is not just like accepting where they are or rah, rah, cheery, cheery, right? There's like actual skills to that. So
Yeah.
when you lose that confidence, when that patient loses that self-efficacy might be another term that we would use.
Yeah.
How do we meet them where they're at? How do we meet them through their resistance? How do we help them with their cognitive reframing? I know it's so hard right now. You just finally got to the stage you wanted to be at, and now we're going backwards. But don't forget all the resiliency you built. If you were if you had gone to that dose on a stage 3 or stage 4 of the adapt, at least, this is what I see clinically. When
Hmm.
people get to the upright bike and walking, they have more resilience. So when a slide happens in stages 1 and 2, we slide. But when we get to stages 3 and 4 and we have some protection from our exercise, we don't go backwards as far. It's really the emotional piece that makes us go backwards. And then how do I stop that emotional piece of being a human from making me go, then I'm just not going to do anything at all. And then it's a disaster, right? And so
Right.
these are skills that you'll learn if you learn some of these other tools like motivational interviewing to help your patient find that confidence when they can't find it in themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. That's a good plug for the new motivational interviewing course. I saw that come out from AMPT. I think this is like, how we interact, how we develop a relationship with a client, how we understand them and what they need in the moment. Like that is better than any like $1 million piece of equipment I could ever buy, right? I think
Yeah.
that is the thing, and I hope clinicians are hearing that. While we just talked about a systematic review on exercise, like this is the piece, and this was not part of those studies, right? Like this is not the part that was being studied, but this
No.
is the part that allows somebody to start exercising, stay exercising, and really manage POTS. Like it is manageable. And exercise is like the drug for that. It really is.
And that's hard, right? And when patients struggle with that too, I mean, and I know we're so far from the article, but honestly, we already summarized the article. Unfortunately, it was pretty easy. But, but when patients say, like, when they're frustrated, which I understand that this may never go away, it may be an autoimmune disorder, so it may wax and wane. It probably will for the rest of our lives. I'll cut it back to something that's a little bit easier. I have celiac disease, of course I do, because I'm in this bucket, right? So I've got at least a few things. And when I don't eat gluten, I'm fine. And when I eat gluten, it doesn't matter how long it's been since I last ate gluten, I get sick. And if I stop eating gluten again, I'm fine, right? And that feels so silly to compare the two, but human health behaviors like exercise are among the hardest things to
Yeah.
get people to do and to maintain. But the medicine is relatively free, it's easily accessible once you can do it, and it's available to you, and you're in charge of it, right? You don't need your insulin refilled, you don't need your heart medicine refilled. You need to find that in yourself to do your cardio and leave allowances for knowing that that is also the hardest human behavior to adapt and maintain long term, right? There's so many research articles out there about how hard it is to get and maintain exercise for chronic health conditions outside of dysautonomia. So it's an easy solution and it's a super hard solution. And so you have to leave a lot of room for grace for yourself. Pick your pieces back up and get started again after a time where you weren't doing maybe everything that we need to be doing, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so hard. So very hard. And I don't want to take too much of your time because your like Instagram timer was already kicking you off of here. But I think one of like the biggest pieces I'll hear from clients or from therapists is like, yes, but MECFS. Yes, but post exertional malaise. And I know that you mentioned that here, and I think it's the beauty of the adapt protocol too is to really screen and really start at a like I just say low and slow, low and slow. Like I'm always going low and slow. But can we just talk about it briefly to address the but?
Yeah. And I'm going to dance a little bit because a lot of people have a lot of really strong opinions in this space, right? My opinion, especially coming from the concussion world, is that putting people in a dark room and isolating them is a slippery slope. It's a troublesome
Right.
place to go. And we've seen that in the literature and other conditions. And so as a person who lives with MECFS, who has done very well by pacing and managing my energy envelope and making mistakes and sliding backwards plenty of times, what I know is that if we can just get to a place where we're functional within whatever that energy envelope looks like, that can be a great quality of life. It may not be the same as a person who doesn't have MECFS. I may be more like a vintage car. I don't get to drive right off the lot, right? I need a little more tender loving care and tinkering in the garage and things like that. But I can live a pretty full life. And so if we use the ADAPT properly, or whatever tool you use, and you focus on not triggering post-exertional malaise, and you focus on looking for other underlying conditions. Do they have underlying viral loads? Do they have MCAS? Are there other things driving their disease at the same time? Patients with MECFS do very well on the ADAPT, but we have to just use a little bit of a softer touch. We have to really make sure they understand the importance of pacing. If my patient is saying my 2 minutes on the wall triggered a 3-day PEM flare, but they also walked around the grocery store for 20 minutes, it might be a conversation about, do we have an accurate perspective of how much we're doing during the day, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question? Did I dance too far away from answering your
No,
question?
no, it was brilliant. You had me at vintage car. I started writing it down. I never like heard that analogy before, and it was brilliant. My dad's a mechanic, so I'm like, oh, this makes total sense. We talked mechanic like analogies my entire life. So this is a vintage car, and there is something that you can do. I think those like are the keys. A lot of folks, a lot of patients that I meet have actually push too hard, too far, too fast, not actually following a really nice, and this is where I'm going to plug your other article that talks about adaptations and kind of like an ABC approach, and a lot of this is in the adapt resources too. So I think this newsletter is just going to be like my love letter to Lauren, and every single thing she has ever like shared. So just be ready, folks, when this newsletter comes out. But that these things we have to take in, it's got to be a person-centered approach. And we really going fast is not helpful. It doesn't get somebody there quicker.
No. And when a patient gets frustrated, like they might get frustrated with me. They're not really, right? That's a big part of motivational interviewing too. They're not frustrated with you as a person. You can't take it personally, but they're
Yeah,
upset about their circumstance. And so they'll say to me like,
right.
you won't let me do any more than X. And I'm like, oh no, if I could just genie you, I would make you better, right? Like I would love to just live on the beach somewhere and not come to work. So that would be great. And so instead it's not that I'm taking something from you. It's just, these are the facts. This is just the way it is. And not owning that sadness, but holding space for it regardless, and helping
Mhm.
them see that like all we can do is meet them where they're at. All we can do is remind them to pace. Just remembering that when we trigger PEM, we can't get better. So how do I help you protect yourself and get out of debt, right? Energy debt, so that you can start to repair your nervous system and get better. And that's really when a patient's frustrated, I don't own it at all. I hold
Mhm.
space for it and I validate it. And I remind them that like I didn't give them long COVID or whatever it is. I just am here to try to give them a roadmap. And really when I mentor clinicians, that can be a hard place for them is they feel frustrated and then they show
Yeah.
their frustration and then you break rapport. right? And so
Yeah.
it's remembering that it's not nobody is doing anything on purpose. It's just a really crummy situation sometimes. And so how do we hold space for how everybody feels and move together as a team and not take that home with you, where you burn out and you don't want to do it anymore, right? We want to keep you once we've gotten you as a
Right.
clinician, not a patient. We want to get rid of you.
As a patient, get out of here. You want to like graduate. But as a clinician, this is a common like problem
Mm-hmm.
because these are chronic conditions and we will bring every thought, like instead of those feelings sitting in my brain box, they are like sitting on my heart, right?
Yeah.
And I am taking them home to my family. And so this is really, I love that message. I think that's a really, really important part of all of this work for us to have like a sustainable career too.
Yeah. There's not that
Yeah.
many of us, so we need to hold on to
No.
those of us who are in the space and get
All
more.
of
We
us
need
like
more.
unicorn, zebra, neuro nerd folks, like we need to be here, and we need more people. We need more clinicians who do this. And I'm so thankful for you, Lauren, for educating us, and doing this work in and sharing the research. And I know the other article that I'll link to is kind of the adapted approaches for this. And then your article that just came out today, which I don't have the title on me, but we should just tease people to go take a look at it because it's in the concussion realm.
Yeah, it's about the motor function domain, for concussion. So there's not a lot of research there either. So hopefully we'll start to see more and more coming out about the motor function domain too. But yeah.
Yeah, you are doing amazing, amazing things, Lauren. I'm so happy we got to hang out on
Thank you for
Instagram
having
today.
me, and thanks for promoting the ADAPT and helping all these patients. It's great.
Yeah, well, thanks for doing it, and leading the way. And we'll have to do this again and talk concussion in the future. And we'll make sure we do it in a time that your Instagram timer works. You've got fans here. Alexa saying, "Lauren, you're the best." You had another former patient was like, "She helped me heal." So you're just doing such amazing things. So you
Thank
deserve
you.
all of the fans and kudos here.
Thank
And then
you.
if people want to find you, Lauren, what's the best way? I know you're in Utah. I know you're at Intermountain Health.
Uh-huh.
Um, what other ways can people get in touch with you?
I have a website that I don't do very much with, but I do have a website, phoenixconcussionrecovery.com. We can like give them my email or something if you want to do that.
Okay,
But yeah, if you have any questions, and then I have ADHD, so if you email me and I don't answer you in a few days, please just email me again. I should be better about responding, but also I am just who I am. So, so
that's
just send it again and you won't offend me.
send me an email, send me a text message, I almost gave you my cell phone number, Lauren, because I also just like miss direct messages on Instagram. I'm the same way. So, Lauren, thank you so much. This was so fun and so great. I learned a lot, and I'm excited to share this with others. And we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Bye,
All
everyone.
right. Bye.